Well, even if there is no election over the budget, we could have a snap vote sometime over the next 6 months, and it could come while Canada is still dealing with COVID-19. The Liberal government introduced a bill, C-19, in December to allow a federal election to unfold safely during the pandemic, if one happens, by offering a 3-day voting period, easier access and use of mail-in ballots, and mobile polling stations. But that bill is now stalled in the legislative process and may not be passed before a snap election occurs. Let's bring in 3 members of Parliament to discuss where all of this is at. Kevin Lamoureux is the Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Privy Council, Dominic LeBlanc, the sponsor of the bill to make the changes to the Elections Act. Marilyn Gladu is the critic for the President of the Privy Council for the official opposition Conservatives, and Daniel Blaikie is the Democratic Reform critic for the NDP. Good to see you all. Mr. Lamoureux, let me start with you. Why is it urgent to pass this bill? Should we expect your government to be going to the people soon?
Well, first and foremost, our priority is not an election. It is continuing to do whatever we can to minimize the negative impacts of the coronavirus or the pandemic. What's important in regards to C-19 is that these are temporary amendments that will offer more ways for Canadians to safely vote actually during a pandemic while ensuring the health and safety of voters, election workers, and in fact all participants in Canada's electoral system,
okay,
which is a good thing.
Okay, and I'll come back to where it is in the process here. But Marilyn
Sure.
Gladu, do Conservatives support the changes in this bill? And if not, why not?
Well, there are many changes in the bill that are going to be very good to protect the workers and to protect the voters and to make sure that people have as many opportunities to vote and that the process is simple. But, Kevin is correct. Canadians don't want an election in a pandemic. And the reality is we have a tried and true democratic process, and we need to make sure that we protect that.
Right, but are you saying that these amendments that I just mentioned, the Parliament should not move to enact those amendments to make an election safer, that we would have an election under the current rules? Everybody votes.
There are certainly, the extra voting days that will provide extra opportunity. We know that there will be more people doing mail-in ballots, so we need to make sure that we have the capacity to process those. And so those are the things that need due debate in the House, and that's what's happening.
Okay. Mr. Blaikie, let me turn to you. These changes are aimed at making it easier and safer to vote in a pandemic. Does the NDP support this bill and these measures to make that happen?
We're generally supportive of what's in the bill. There are some other things that we'd like to look at putting in the bill, and it's why we're keen to get that bill to committee, because while I respect my Conservative colleagues' desire for debate, the fact of the matter is right now in second reading, we're debating the principle of the bill. And what's the principle? The principle is that the current election rules aren't adequate to a pandemic. Then there's the details of the bill, and I think those are properly discussed at committee, and then perhaps, depending on what comes out of committee, even more so in the House of Commons. But at the moment, on the principle, I'm really surprised that most members wouldn't be satisfied that we need to make some modifications to the Canada Elections Act to make sure that we have an election that is both safe from a public health point of view, but also from the point of view of ensuring that everybody who wants to vote can vote, that there are no unnecessary or insurmountable barriers to voting. Oh. And so, we should be able to get that done and move it on to committee.
Yeah, that's what we're certainly talking about. Mr. Lamoureux, why is the bill stalled in Parliament? What's been holding it up?
In one word, Conservative Party, or I guess that's 2 words. At the end of the day, the government has attempted on a few occasions to get it through. We have to recognize that there's a finite amount of time on the floor of the House of Commons during second reading. We have seen, some filibuster or frustration that has taken place. No indication at all from the Conservatives how long they would like to speak to the legislation. I think the principle is very positive, and the minister has gone out of his way to opposition members to say, look, let's get it to committee, let's talk about it, open to changes and so forth. We need to get it out of second reading.
So let me move to Marilyn Gladu. Let me come back. If you support in principle what the bill is trying to do, Are you on board with trying to get it through the process as quickly as possible so that we do have a snap election? These changes to the Elections Act would be in place. Where are Conservatives on that?
Absolutely, Peter. But what the Parliamentary Secretary has just said is absolutely not the case. The government is in control of the schedule in the House. They've scheduled this bill 4 times and then withdrawn it from the schedule. I know because I was scheduled to speak. We've had one Conservative speaker out of 120 of us that's had an opportunity to talk about the things that we like and the things that we don't like about this bill.
How many Conservatives? How many Conservatives do you think will be speaking on it? Can you tell us that? How many want to speak on it?
I've had 17 express interest, but certainly we're willing to work with the government on this to get it across. But it's going to a committee. Keep in mind, it's been filibustering for 40 hours because of the Liberals' desire to cover up, why they prorogued Parliament over the WE scandal.
That's Mr. Blaikie. That's a fair point, I suppose. I mean, if speed is of the essence here, even if you do get it to committee, it's supposed to go to a committee that right now has been 40 hours of filibustering over the reasons why the government prorogued last summer. So is this thing doomed?
Well, having taken in almost all of those 40 some odd hours of the filibuster procedure in House Affairs Committee, I can say it is indeed very frustrating. But typically when legislation is sent to committee, it takes priority. So that might actually, offer a welcome break. I don't think this legislation is doomed at all, but we do need to find a way to move it forward. We're certainly open to discussing options around having, more sitting time in order to be able to do this. But I think it's at the point, frankly, where the parties need to sit down and come up with a plan. And so if we can only debate C-19 by having some evening sittings or a weekend sitting or something, everybody should be putting their cards on the table, say who wants to speak, how much time we think is reasonable, in order to get it to committee. Because the idea that we could end up falling into an election and not have adapted our election rules for a pandemic is just ridiculous, frankly. And I think, Canadians should be disappointed. If they're not, they should be. I think they are, that we can't get our act together on this. This is it's time to be an adult in the room and get this done.
Mr. Lamoureux, notwithstanding, so is it a scheduling issue? Is it parliamentarians don't necessarily want to agree with shortening the amount of time they have for debate on issues such as this. So is this a logistical problem in your mind, or do you think, are you suggesting Conservatives don't want the legislation to pass and they're actively trying to block it?
I do believe that they're actively trying to block it. Like when Gladys makes reference to the fact, well, we've called it and we've withdrawn it. Well, we have called it. I remember one day I was there sitting ready to be able to speak, and as opposed to the bill being called, the Conservatives move a motion of concurrence on our report, which killed the day in terms of being able to debate Bill C-19. We just heard Gladys say, well, maybe 17 members. Well, that equates to 8.5 hours or 2 days of debate. Remember, there's a lot of legislation that is there. It's not like government can bring, we have the budget, we have the supports, we have the economic statement. There's all sorts
Let's
of
see.
things that are there.
You said Gladys, but I think you mean Marilyn Gladu. But
I'm sorry.
But
yes.
Ms. Gladu, what can you tell Mr. Lamoureux right now? Let's make a deal right here on CPAC. What can you tell him about how you're prepared to move this forward?
Obviously, it's on the docket for debate tomorrow and Monday. Mm-hmm. We'll certainly put up our speakers. But keep in mind, the government was in a rush to introduce this in December. And then they didn't bring it forward for debate until the end of February for the first time, and then withdrew it. So, certainly we're willing to work with them, and we're willing to come to a compromise, because we do want to make sure that we protect the workers and the people that are voting in the election. And so we'll move forward and see how it goes on Monday.
Okay, last 30 seconds to you, Mr. Blaikie. How does this get fixed?
Well, look, it took us from June to October to get a study at PROC on pandemic elections. Once we got it underway, the conversation around the table was pretty good. We had a lot of all-party recommendations. I just think, you can either be focused on blame or you can be focused on solutions. The time has come to get focused on a solution on this. When it comes to election law changes, all parties really should be at the table. So we should be sitting down and figuring out a plan for how to move this forward. And I think it's just incredibly disappointing that we haven't been able to do that yet.
We'll continue to watch how all this unfolds. Thanks to all of you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.